All right, this is Geoffrey Cravero, and I'm conducting an oral history with William Eure, Tom Bryce, and Jan Charles Potter. The interview is being conducted at
Zellwood Community Center.
Zellwood Community Center on April 11th, 2022. All right, gentlemen, would you please begin by stating your names for us and telling us a bit about where you're from and what life was like for you growing up?
I'm Willard, Buddy Eure. I was born in Orlando. I've been here all my life. And I was raised around the Fern Creek school area. Went to Edgewater High School. Graduated there and went over to Eure in Daytona when they first moved out of Miami and attended college over there. And my family's been in the crop dusting business all my life, and I just continued on in my dad's footsteps. And I got a big, pretty good sized family. Live right here in Central Florida. I got nieces and nephews and all that's graduated from UCF and various degrees. And that's just about it for me. I've just been in the business, been retired now for about 10, 12 years. And I sold my airplane back in 99 and got completely out of it because I saw it was diminishing industry, to say the least. That's about it for me.
I'm Tom Bryce, and I was born up in Michigan, but came to Florida and didn't look back. It's cold up there. But I became an ag pilot after going to college and got a job in Michigan. And since a short season, that at the end of the season I came to Florida and went to work for the Potters and been here ever since.
I'm Charles Potter, and born in San Angelo, Texas. It's where my parents and all of my relatives were from. My dad was in the Air Force, and when he got out of the Air Force, he was looking for a job, and so he moved the family down to Belgrade, Florida, and worked down there for a short while. And Zellwood was just getting started in the farming business. So he moved to Zellwood and built the airport there. It's now called Bob White Airport. And so we started with Wacos first, and then we were flying Stearmans, and then we went to the Piper products, and we did Piper aircraft. Along the way, we started doing testing for their aircraft that they were building. Some of the new ag aircraft. And this area here was just a very rural area. Orlando was just a village when we moved here. And so as far as crop dusting, like I say, it's a rural area, so it was really easy to do. But today it's too populated in a lot of areas where we're working.
So you already sort of answered the second question, how you became involved in aerial application. What were some of the types of crop protection products that you used over your time?
Crop protection products?
Or like, what sort of things did you use to, what sort of products did you use for fertilizers or insecticides?
Well, in our business, we work for a lot of very different farmers and all over the state of Florida and South Georgia. And so we were using all the products. Back when we first started, when I got into it, there were very few restrictions on any of the chemicals. And today there's tremendous restrictions. So when we first started flying, you could put out just about anything. And one thing I'll mention, we were growing spinach on our farm. We had a farm also. and we grew for Del Monte and several other large companies. And we were dusting crops then rather than spraying. We didn't do a lot of spraying, most of it was dusting. And with dust, it goes every place. It goes with the wind. And so with this, the spinach crop products we were growing, and we were dusting next to the spinach crops, we were getting we call it cross-contamination. And Del Monte was the first company that told us that we were getting DDT and some of these other products on their products that they're selling. So my dad said, well, we've got to do something about this. So we pretty much stopped dusting at that point, and we started spraying, and spraying doesn't drift nearly as much as a dust will. I remember at Zellwood here, when we were dusting DDT on sweet corn, it would, on some days when the air was very calm, it would drift over 441, and they'd have to put headlights going down 441. It was so thick. But the local people liked it because it killed all the gnats and flies, and so when corn season was over, they asked us, when are we going to keep doing this? Because and it also got rid of a lot of mosquitoes. So there was some benefit to that.
Yeah, I can remember some mornings, well, as you do, that we would be dusting, and it would be just like one big fog bank out there. You couldn't hardly see where you were going. And we were all out there flying around like a bunch of flies. And it was wonder we did run into one another, but we didn't, you know. But I personally was real glad to see us change over to spray, because you could control it a lot better.
Well, let me just say, we were putting out a product, Fosgren dust, that was made by Shell Chemical Company. And my dad knew it was real dangerous. Fosgren is one of the most dangerous products that we put out, because it's extremely poisonous. Get on your skin and go right through your skin. And so when we were putting out Fosgren dust, he would make us all, as soon as we put it out, go home and take a shower, because it was so deadly. And also, Shell Chemical Company had people in their factory, in their plant, were getting sick. So these are things that we were exposed to that we didn't know. I mean, we didn't make the product, we put it out. And known to us, it was so dangerous. Those are things that have changed with the industry over the years.
Yeah, well, actually, phosgene gas was outlawed in World War II by both sides. It sure was. It's that dangerous. I know I put out a world of it, and my dad actually got sick off of it, and because we just didn't know, you know, to go and get cleaned up. In the dusting days back then, I mean, you looked like Pillsbury Doughboy. I mean, you just covered with it, and we didn't know the dangers of it. And that was one thing that I was glad to see it go, to be honest with you. It was a bad product.
Now, some of the dusting we did was with sulfur dust. And on citrus, we put about anywhere from 40 to 50 pounds of sulfur dust on citrus to kill the rust mites that would turn the citrus rind, it would turn it black, the citrus, so they couldn't sell it. So we put, we dusted citrus for years, even after the Fosgren dust and some of that stuff. That the government actually did eliminate that, which was good for the environment and good for the pilots that had to put it out. People don't realize that the pilots are exposed to much more chemicals than anybody on the ground. They say, well, these farm workers are out here and they're picking crops that have chemicals. Well, the pilot's flying back through this all the time, and when it's loaded, you're getting it in the airplane constantly. So the pilot is exposed to probably 1,000 times more than the farm workers ever thought about being exposed to. So,
Oh yeah, and then you got the sulfur dust. Sulfur is in the matchstick, and it'll catch on fire.
Yeah.
I've gone and taken the bag of dust, slide it across there, you catch on fire. Be out there beating it to death and getting the garden hose and watering it down. It was dangerous. It really was.
well, also, exhaust from an airplane when you're dusting
Oh yeah.
can set the swath behind the airplane on fire.
Mhm.
And it could follow the airplane and blow the airplane up. But that's happened over the years. Didn't happen to us, but it's happened to a few of the people across the United States. Pretty dangerous.
Do you need particular weather conditions to dust or to spray?
Certainly. I mean, I have, it's amazing, but I have put out chemicals in hurricane force winds. And I told the farmers, I said, you're wasting your money and you're wasting your time. Plus it's going all over different areas that we didn't want it to go into. So, but we always check the weather before we started flying. I mean, that's critical. Inversion is critical, where it's lifted up into the atmosphere. So, yes, we always check the weather. Very critical.
You mentioned, I think, that your father had some health issues related to some of the early on products. Did you or anybody else that you knew ever experience any sort of health issues related to any of the products that were being used back then?
Well, I specifically knew one time that I got real dizzy, and it was from putting out, I'd been putting out phosphor dust that morning. And it wasn't a pleasant feeling, let me put it that way. And I managed to make it, although I lived in Orlando, from out here, I managed to make it back to the house, and I didn't get in the shower, but I was pretty sick there for several hours. But I got over it.
I got some of the lanny dust on my skin, and it penetrates through the skin, but where you notice it is your pupils get small.
Mm-hmm.
And I left,
Can't see.
left the farm
Can't see.
and driving home in these car lights looking like little candles looking at me.
Yeah.
But it took, get a good night's sleep, and it's gone the next morning.
Well, years ago, we were putting out Parathon spray on a citrus grove over at Brooksville. And I'm not sure if you were working with us at that time, but anyhow, it went on into the afternoon, and it was real hot, and I could see it, this Parathon spray getting on my windshield. And when I got home, I was very, very sick. And back in those days, you didn't go to the doctor. And so I stayed in bed for about two or 3 days, and my dad said, be very careful about flying once, you got sick like that. And of course, you try to be tough. And so I got in the plane and took off, and I was still very sick, as it affects your nervous system. And so when I took off, I felt like I was rolling upside down. And I didn't think I could make it back to the airport. And I was just extremely lucky. So then I spent another 2 days in bed after that. So finally got okay, but never went to the doctor. They have atropine that you can take, and of course that's pretty tough on you too, to take that. I mean, that's just the hazards we were involved in. And of course that was in the early days. Like I was saying, the chemicals did get safer and safer as the years went on. And of course the government started regulating what we could put on crops. It had to be certified, each chemical had to be certified for each crop. So I thought that was good. And they eliminated a lot of the hazardous chemicals that we were exposed to early on.
Yeah, they restricted that here in the United States. However, in the world, it's used right on, right today. Stuff that we can't use here in the United States, and a lot of that produce is being imported right back to the United States.
Not
I think
inspected at the
y'all,
border to catch it all, because it's such a good product that they're going to use it. The problem with this stuff, it builds up in your system. So a little bit, and then this triggering, and you've gotten too much, and then you gotta stop.
What do you think are some of the positive aspects of crop dusting and spraying? And also, on the other side, what are some of the challenges that come with it?
Well, I just say that the importance of crop dusting is underestimated. I was just talking to a mechanic today working on one of our cars, and he said, you know, he asked me what I did, and I said, well, I'm in the real estate business now, but we were in the crop dusting business for about 50 years. And he said, people don't realize how important farming is. And with the advent of computers, everybody thinks the computer industry is the most important thing in the world. It's not. Farming and food is the most important thing in the world. You can live without computers, but you cannot live without food. And people,
exactly right.
and people at these universities do not understand it, and these academia, they don't understand what the reality is. And they try to limit crop dusting. They think it's a bad thing. And farmers, the ones that have to pay for all this, they use crop dusting because it's so efficient and cheap. Yeah, it's efficient and it's economical. You don't have tractors going through the field compacting the soil or hitting your crops, or if in citrus it knocks some of the oranges off the tree. There's all sort of positive things to aerial application that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. That's true.
What are some of the challenges that you face when you
Challenges?
like? What were some of the?
Staying alive.
Well, you know, flying an airplane that's overloaded. Also, they're heavy airplanes, and like one day I had a I can't remember exactly what we were doing down in Kissimmee, but I had to fly from here to Kissimmee with a heavy load, and I had to look way out ahead and make sure there's no antennas or anything, because you can't maneuver an airplane real like you would want to. And so we're just in a straight line, you know, and can't climb very much. And so that part of it is, flying an airplane can be extremely hazardous. And, you know, you got power lines, you got all sort of things that, you know, especially when you go to new areas, a lot of things that you don't realize are there that could be dangerous.
They have a dump panel on the airplane. You don't want to get rid of this expensive material and dump it on somebody else's land, but it's there in case you need it. You dump that thing, and in a people airplane, you can't be going down the runway and see you can't get it in the air and ask this guy sitting beside you if he step out.
Jump out, yeah. You can't do that. Yeah, I remember I had one customer just east of OIA, and he grew tobacco plants and transported up to West Georgia. And I remember I'd have to call the tower there and get permission to come around and let them know that I was going to be down there spraying tobacco plants. Then when I got back down here, over here, and like you say, You can't get much altitude, airplane's heavy, high wing loading, and then I'd have to call them and tell them, okay, I made it. You don't have to worry about me no more. So they can tell the airline traffic, you know, be advised, we got an airplane, agricultural airplane operating east of the airport. I can remember that vividly.
Let's see, what are some of the consequences that the restoration of Lake Apopka has had on the community here?
Well, you can put restoration in quotation marks because the restoration of Lake Apopka, I fly across it about every week, and it's no better today than it was when they bought several $100 million worth of farms out here. It's really a pathetic mess, and the St. John's Water District will not admit that. And they're going to, I think they were appropriated, somebody said they're going to spend about probably close to $1 billion on it before it's over with. And it's, like I say, no telling how many millions they've spent on it already. I mean, hundreds of millions. And I think it's worse today than it was when they took over the project. I mean, that's my opinion. Like I say, I'm here, I look at it every day, I fly across it every day. One of the bad things about Lake Apopka, it's a muck bottom lake. And back in the late 40s, early 50s, the fish camp operators over at Lake Apopka, they're on Lake Apopka, on the east side of Lake Apopka. Lake Apopka was one of the best bass fishing lakes in the world. We had a lot of movie stars would come in here and stay at a little hotel here at Zellwood, and they fish. And but what happened? The hyacinths got real bad. Hyacinths is a water weed that floats on top of the surface, and they couldn't get their boats out on Lake Apopka, so they started complaining, and the Fish and Wildlife decided they were going to spray the hyacinths. And my dad said that they put out a bid, and somebody from Miami got it. I can't remember what their names were, but they came up and sprayed the lake. And they sprayed it several times with 2,4-D, which is a weed killer. And the lake was very clear back then. You could see the bottom, but like I say, it's a muck bottom lake. And what happened when they sprayed, the hyacinths sunk to the bottom, and it cut off the sunlight to the aquatic weeds that were holding the muck bottom together. And so I remember when the wind would start blowing, and it looked like chocolate milk in the waves, the muck would just start coming up to the surface. And so that was the beginning of the end for Lake Apopka. And personally, the way I see it now, I don't see it improving for the next 400 or 500 years. I just don't see, they don't have the technology to clean it up. But they will tell you they do, and they'll spend the taxpayers' money, and I'm afraid it's a lot for naught.
Well, when they put that lock in over there at Beauclair Canal, they held that water level up. And the reason they held it up because a lot of the citrus growers on the west side, all out Winter Garden, Claremont, and all like that, it would get a warming effect in cold weather. So they built that lock on there to hold the water level up. And if they didn't have that lock there, the lake and the Aquaha train would drain naturally from the weather conditions. And that would get that sunlight down in there. But somebody in their infinite wisdom decided, no, we want to protect all these farmers from losing their crops. And I can see that, but you know, a lot of times it's not too good to go against Mother Nature. They know they know what they're doing, you know, and as a result, all the Aquaha chain, I'm sure y'all from know too, is not near as clear as when we were kids and growing up. I mean, all these lakes were beautiful, kind of like Lake Eure where Jan lives. Mm-hmm. And all the lakes. I remember all of them around Orlando there. As a boy, I'd fish in and swim in and water ski in and all that. And I wouldn't even get in there. I wouldn't get my foot in there now. You know, you might not bring your foot back out, or your toes. But I just think, I'm like Jan, I just don't believe Lake Apopka will ever be what it was. Because I can remember going with my dad and my uncle fishing as a little boy. And that lake, like Jan said, was clear, and oh, there was some big bass in that place. Man.
My dad had a good idea. The headwaters for Lake Apopka comes out of Gore Neck Springs, which is on the southwest corner of Lake Apopka, a huge spring. And he said that you could dam up everything around the spring and come right, there's a canal, a Beauclair Canal that comes off of Lake Apopka going to the rest of the chain of lakes, and put a dike there so that water could still flow, and then clean out, let the rest of it go down and clean that muck bottom off, and sell the muck somehow or get rid of it. And then you'd have clear water going from the Gore Neck Springs all the way to the chain of lakes. And
Have to clean them up. Lake areas, little lake areas, had to clean them up.
yeah, all the way up to, you know, it runs into St. John, the river.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just don't think they'll ever do. It would change the environment of that lake entirely, so I don't think they'd ever.
No, they're not gonna do that because too many people at St. John Water Management, they don't want their jobs taken away from them. And I tell you something else. I worked for Duda, which is A. Duda and Son, which is the largest farm outfit. And we built, they blamed the farmer for polluting the lake, naturally. There's no boats there. So we built a 330 acre retention pond on our farm. And we never pumped into the lake. We quit pumping in the lake. We used that water, that retention pond. And Dan's flown, you've flown over, and they could never explain why the water in that retention pond was absolutely clear. They could never explain that. It was just speckled perch and bass and stuff come out of there. It was great. I mean, it just, but like I say, the government gets involved and stuff sometimes. It's not a good idea. It really isn't.
Is there anything else that anyone would like to add or expand on? Do you have any final thoughts for us today?
Well, just like I said, the importance of aerial application, ag aviation to agriculture, I think it's understated. Academia, people, they just don't understand, and they want to restrict it. It's a necessity for growing food for the world, and worldwide, I'm sure it's. I can see in these populated areas like Central Florida is now that it'd be very difficult where we used to operate here.
No, yeah, you can.
But places all over the world, it's rural areas where they're growing crops. It's probably the only way to do it economically, and so it'll sustain food production for the world. But I think someday there's going to be problems with our population keeps expanding. So food production will.
Well, and too, Jan, it's the attitude. You know, I've seen it on TV too. People just sit there, oh, we don't need to farm. We'll just go to the grocery store and get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their attitude.
Yeah.
They have no idea what it takes to put a plate of food in front of them.
Yeah.
They have no idea. Yeah, we'll just go to McDonald's, get a hamburger. We don't need ranchers.
I'm still spraying, and up there in Illinois in the summertime, but these people move out of the city to get out in the country, and then they sit there and complain about airplane noise and spraying a crop, when if they want to be out in the country, they have to put up with some of the air application.
And that's how they live. If they want to get out of the city, you got to change the way you live. I mean, that's just part of it. You just,
Some of the people that are moving out of New York to move down to Florida, they have to get used to Florida.
yeah, that's true. But I take, and Tom here, at one time, this muck area right out here produced almost all of the winter vegetable crops east of the Mississippi River during the winter. Isn't that right, Dan? Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much so, yeah.
Yeah. That's feeding a lot of folks.
If you'd like, do you want to name some of our area's past crop dusters?
Okay, I mean, what did you want to do?
Some of the past crop masters.
Well, my dad and my uncle, your dad,
Yeah.
Say who
and
they
you.
name them.
Well, my dad was Tag Eure, and my uncle was Mac Eure, and then I had a cousin, Jerry White, that was involved in it, and myself. And I had 3 or 4 guys that flew for me, and unfortunately they passed. But Sherwin LaFountain, Tom flew for me.
Well, let me just say, you were asking about health issues in ag pilots. Leroy Brown, he was an ag pilot. And how old was he when he passed away?
Let's see, Leroy was over the mother, and Leroy would have been, when he passed, Leroy would be 99.
Yeah, and so I don't really know many ag pilots that have had health issues. I mean, like I mentioned, I've been poisoned before, but feel great today. And I think that's probably overstated also, you know. And today with the restrictions that our government has, you know, when we put out DDT and all those chemicals, I mean, there wasn't much research done on it. You know, of course, Rachel Carson and Silent Spring, she wrote that book, and the bird eggshells are fragile, and those things came along the way that we learned that, you know, some of these chemicals should be on the market, but certainly ag pilots didn't have anything to do with it. We don't research it. I mean, you're talking about people like DuPont and Monsanto, and all these people are the ones that put those on the market. Like I told the state of Florida when they came, we were selling out, and they found traces of the DDT on our farm. I said, that's not Potter's, that's whoever invented DDT put it out. You know, they're at fault, not us. But anyhow, that's another controversy you get into. But yeah, I know just about everybody on that list you just gave me.
Yeah, I do.
As far as health issues with any of them, no. I'll tell you a quick story. My dad was in a very severe accident. I won't go into details, but 2 airplanes hit together and it pulled his bottom jaw off He wasn't expected to live, and they sent him to Orlando Memorial Hospital. The doctor said later that the only way they thought he lived, he got some DDT dust in his system and his face, that they said most people would have died from blood poisoning. And they said he lived. They're almost 100% sure that he lived because he had that chemical on him. So it did have some positive effects. It's not all negative.
Yeah, I'm sure our immune system was built up on it because that's just a natural process, you know? When you're involved with this stuff, it's on a daily basis, so.
Well, you look at people like Leroy Brown, and there's a lot of them around that, that retired and probably close to 100 years old and no bad side effects. So, but, the news media picks up on farm workers and they're exposed to all this bad chemical and they need to go on welfare and all this. It's not true. And I just feel like it's so exaggerated.
Well, they got to sensationalize everything. That's what sells. And primarily bad news. That's what sells.
Yeah, that's right.
We had to post fields before we sprayed them, so many days before they can re-enter the field. And made it as safe as possible.
And then after 9/11, the paperwork just you spend more time doing paperwork than you were sitting in an airplane. Time you take off, how long is it gonna take you, when will you be back? All this kind of stuff. So you wake up one day and you said, I've had enough. Go do something else. That's what I did. Sold them all, found me something else to do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts and your stories with us today. This has been Geoffrey Cravero here on April 11th, 2022.
Okay.